You are listening to the Special Needs Children podcast with Chitra Iyer. Chitra Iyer is a parent of 22-year-old Shravan Iyer who has epilepsy, cerebral palsy and autism. She is the CEO of MFA and has been helping families with life-centered planning to reach their personal financial goals. She is also a trustee of the parent support group, the Forum for Autism, which was set up almost 2 decades ago. MFA is a 16-year-old organization working in the personal finance space. They have set up a dedicated practice to help families with special needs children to plan their financial goals and invest for the same. The thoughts shared here are as a result of discussions with parents, caregivers, siblings and professionals regarding the planning of a person with special needs. In this episode, Chitra is talking to Dr. Roopa Srinivasan, a developmental pediatrician who heads the clinical services at Ummeed Child Development Centre.
Hello everyone, a big warm welcome to all of you on this expert series of my podcast for special needs children. Today I have with me a dear friend, Dr. Roopa Srinivasan. Thank you, dear Roopa, for your time and agreeing to do this interview with me.
Hi, Chitra. It's so lovely to be here today. And you're right. I mean, we've known each other for many years now. And I was thinking back, and I think we've known each other now for more than 12 to 13 years. It's just been absolutely amazing. And I've been watching you with great pride and admiration from the sidelines as well. I've seen how you manage so many different facets of your life and how you do some amazing work professionally. And also, I've been witness to some of your personal journey from the sidelines. So it's been a privilege to know you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all those real kind words. But I've been really fortunate to have known you, as you rightly said, for nearly 15 years now. And I have listened to you, Roopa, over the years so many times, so often. Whenever you have shared your wisdom with us, you have spoken so calmly and beautifully, and you've explained and handheld many parents like me through our journey of understanding our children better. Moving on, just to introduce you formally to our listeners, Dr. Roopa Srinivasan has over 15 years of experience as a practicing developmental pediatrician. She heads the clinical services at Ummeed Child Development Centre, a leading not-for-profit organization that works in the space of child development and disabilities in India. Roopa, diving straight to the first question that immediately would pop up to anyone. What is the meaning of a developmental pediatrician? Can you please explain what does a person who studies to be and who practices as a developmental pediatrician do actually?
It is a mouthful, isn't it? So, quite simply put, I'm a pediatrician by training, and after completing my post-graduation in pediatrics, I super specialized in child development and disabilities. So just like you have a specialist in children's heart disease and you call them pediatric cardiologists, or a specialist for children's kidney conditions where you call them a pediatric nephrologist, a developmental pediatrician is someone who specializes in child development.
That really is a mouthful, and I'm sure that the role is extremely crucial also. So moving on to, can you please share why did you choose to be a developmental pediatrician?
I would say it was purely serendipitous. Looking back, sometimes, you can join the dots in hindsight. So I was working at Justloke Hospital, and I was extremely fortunate to be surrounded by big names and stalwarts all around me. Not the least of whom was Dr. Krishnamurthy, who continues to be my mentor till date. And even now, I see many pediatricians who have been trained, who've never come across, a specialist like a developmental pediatrician in their training or formative years. I was one of those lucky people who happened to be working at the same time as Vibha was at Jaslok, and needless to say, was hugely inspired by her and her work. So it was just curiosity that led me in her direction. And I say serendipity because Vibha had just set up Ummeed at that time, and she was looking for young people to train. Because India did not have a formal training program in developmental pediatrics at that time. We are talking about the early 2000s. She wanted to train somebody in-house, and she was looking for somebody like that. And I was right there, at the right time, in the right place, as you say, and the rest is history.
Super. Really, we're all blessed to have Dr. Vibha in our lives, really. And thanks to her, you have been in our lives and so many other families' lives, helping them and guiding them. So, can you please share your journey a little more? How did it begin for you? How did you land up coming into the medical profession itself?
Okay, so I am from a small town. I grew up in a small town, and I did all of my schooling and my MBBS there. This is a place called Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh, and I grew up there because my parents, even though they are South Indians or Tamilians, settled there many years ago. So and then from there I came for my post graduation to Mumbai. This was in the early 2000s, in 2001 to be precise, and then have stayed on over here since then. I joined Ummeed for a brief stint in 2005, and then left Ummeed for a study sabbatical when I went to Christian Medical College in Vellore for a year and a half, completed my fellowship there. And then ever since, after that, since I have been back, I've been at Ummeed. And it's been 15 years now of association with Ummeed.
Wow, that's really amazing. So, can you please share how important is your role in the diagnosis for a child? And also, along with this, I'd like to ask, are there enough people like you, enough developmental pediatricians available for those who require your service?
Right. So I would say, at this point of time, we are, of course, the tribe of developmental pediatricians in India, I'm happy to say, is steadily growing, thanks to a lot of recent efforts and push for training more and more pediatricians in this field. But clearly the demand way outstrips what we have as resources. So we often talk about this number and we don't realize how staggering this number is. So at least 15% of our population has some kind of developmental difficulty or disability. So in India, if we extrapolate this to the number of children that we have, this number comes to a staggering 52 million children who need services of someone who understands child development. Now, that can't always be a developmental pediatrician because very few of our children have access to even a pediatrician, let alone a developmental pediatrician. So often the person that they go to would be a GP who is close to them, or sometimes even someone who is a healthcare worker, is a community health worker. So in that sense, while the tribe of developmental pediatricians is steadily growing, I wouldn't say they are enough. Much more needs to be done, but we are on the right path. There are many centers who have started working in this space and who are now working to build capacity in this space. Your initial question of is, how was it? How important my role is in establishing a diagnosis? Was that right, Chitra?
Yeah, the actual role, why is it so important that a child needs to go to you and, your role in the diagnosis for a child.
Right. So I'm going to say that a developmental pediatrician's role does not stop at diagnosis, even though diagnosis itself seems like a big hill to climb. It doesn't stop at diagnosis. And that's often a misconception because then, everyone who's working with the child feels once a diagnosis is made, why should we send the child and family back to a developmental pediatrician? I would say that the DP or developmental pediatrician is often this person who ends up, building a lifelong relationship with the family and with the child. We try and understand holistically, what makes this family tick? What makes this child tick? What are their strengths? What are their hopes and dreams? And at the end of the day, diagnosis is one part of a person. It doesn't define a person. It doesn't define a child. It doesn't define a family. The diagnosis, sure, is an important thing to consider because a lot of your actions and your life course are determined by that. But that's not the only thing. So often it's the developmental pediatrician who keeps this perspective, who looks at, like I said, what works for this family, what makes them tick, what are their strengths, what is the strength of this child, and then sees, how does the diagnosis influence their lives in this context? How does it change their experience of life, and how can we support them so that they continue to work in the direction of what their hopes and dreams are for themselves? So the first visit, of course, is a visit where, the family is coming with a lot of questions. What's happening to my child? Why is this hard for him or her? What can I do to make it better? And through a process of detailed parental interview, doing some assessments on the child, we are able to arrive at some answers to these questions. But what follows that is as important as what happens in that first meeting. So putting them in touch with the right resources, making sure that those resources are actually working for this family. This family's emotional and mental well-being is maintained throughout this journey, that the child is continuing to do well. And if some of this is not quite in place, what can we do differently to help matters? So all of this is what follows after that first meeting, and which is why I said, the developmental pediatrician is one who ends up having this lovely relationship with the family if we have the opportunity to stay in touch with them over a period of time.
This, you couldn't have really spelled it out any better, Roopa. I have genuinely benefited because of, this entire team at Ummeed having helped out for my child. Your role is virtually like that of a sutradhar. And as you spelt out, taking care of every single aspect of what's happening for the child and for the family. It really, really benefits when the family actually comes and is regularly in touch and does their follow-ups as prescribed by you guys. And it's an absolute necessary is what I could, actually say to any parent who gets a diagnosis. As you rightly said, it's not about the diagnosis at all. It's about what all happens post that, how you handhold and how you help us in thinking this through, because there's so much to be done. Moving on, Roopa, how has the quality of diagnosis and therapy changed in India according to you? Would you say it has been influenced a lot because of various international practices too?
I think both ways. I think we are influenced by what's happening globally. But I think what's really exciting now is that we've reached a point where we are influencing global thinking as well. So I talked about the numbers in India, right? Now imagine this, that if 95% of the world's children live in countries like ours, we have to have a say in how care is delivered, or what works for families like ours, right? So which is why I think we are now in very exciting times where the influence is going both ways, that we are keeping an eye on what's happening globally, especially in the West and in high income countries. But they are also learning from us in terms of what works in different cultures, what works in different settings, what happens when there aren't so many resources as what exists in the US and UK and Canada. What are some new modes of service delivery that can be thought of? And these are lessons that are primarily emerging from countries like ours. So certainly things are changing for the better. There's more evidence that's coming up. There's more there's more interest in research. So things are definitely looking up, and the quality of diagnosis, I think, is definitely getting better. But this is also not something where you reach a it's not a destination, it's a journey. There's always something that we can make better. There's always something that we can improve upon.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when a parent comes to you, and then you prescribe and say that you need to do XYZ things for the child, right? And then the parent needs to decide and jointly, along with you, understand and then go and figure out how to get the required intervention, the required therapies that are important for the child. So, how do you guide families? And how do you guide a parent to choose? Say, maybe like, are you helping them prioritize what is needed to be done at first? What if they have limited resources? What if one parent is working, another one needs to travel around with the child, because we don't have too many places with everything under one roof? And also, they could have other constraints. So, how do you guide families?
Great question, Chitra. I think, I'm very excited by this question because also this is my area of passion. So, what you described right now is exactly what family-centered services are all about, or should be all about, where you're looking at two kinds of expertise, right? So I may be sitting in the room and I may be an expert in the disability that one is talking about. I might know scientifically about the disability and what it's about, etc. But the parents and the child who are in the room are actually experts of their lives. They are the ones who understand their context the best. They understand, what restrictions they have in everyday life. As you put it, parents might be working, it may be hard for them to travel. That's part of their context, and I may not know anything about that at all. So, which is why when you're making a decision about a plan for this family, that decision has to account for both of these perspectives. What is needed for a particular disability, but also what is the reality of the situation that this family comes from, and therefore what can be a best possible plan for them. And that is what we call as informed decision making. So it is a developmental pediatrician's role to provide information to families, also to listen to them, to hear about what works for them, what's a challenge for them, and for them to together collaborate and arrive at certain decisions that might work best for them at that stage in life. But of course, this is something that will constantly evolve. Your life situation changes, and some of these decisions will also have to change accordingly. So, absolutely, I couldn't have said it better, Chitra. That's exactly how it ought to happen. And that's not how it often ends up happening, though. That's also a reality.
How true. Really, that last line is really the punch. That it may not also, it may not just go in a structured way. There's so many things that keep happening and changing in a person's life, right?
Yes, and also that professionals like me need to be aware of this, need to be mindful of this. And it doesn't, when we are working with a condition that is going to be there with the child for life, perhaps,
Yeah, yeah.
or with the family for life, you cannot take a very myopic view, and you cannot deal with it like you would deal with, let's say, a patient that I saw who has a health condition, like let's say a cough or a cold or even a malaria. That is a short-term view. I can prescribe certain medications. I will ask you to take them, and that's the end of it. Whereas here, there are so many different variables, and I need to be sensitive to those. Professionals like me need to be aware of those and factor them in when we are talking about a plan. And you will never know enough about a family because you're not living their lives, and which is where we need to be open and humble enough to ask what works for them, to constantly take them along with us, or even ask them to guide us in some of these decisions that need to be made for the child. And at a certain point, or right from the beginning, even the child needs to have a voice.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, you just led me into the next question where, I was actually asking you, do you guide families to think about future planning for their child? And how do you guide them? And are families willing to sit down, listen to you, and discuss this?
I think this cannot be a one-time conversation. This needs to be something that happens at every visit in some form or another, and it does happen. But I think sometimes we can, and I'm talking about myself also over here, that we can tend to be very tactical about it. That we address the crisis or the situation that's happening right now, and so recently, what a few of us, both at Ummeed as well as some of our partner organizations, have been trying to do is to use a framework called the F words. These are a fun take on what can be important to children and families. These 6 F words stand for fun, family, fitness, function, friends, and future. So, as opposed to a traditional interview where I'm asking about, how does your what is what is your child able to do? How much is your child talking? What is something that your child is struggling with? The moment I flip the framework or the lens to these F words, there is a noticeable shift in the whole tone of the conversation. The families are more engaged, they are leaning forward. And when we talk about what's important to their child, what do you do to have fun as a family? What do you do together? What about friends? How's your child doing on that front? Who are his friends? Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you hope for your child's future? Often this can lead us on paths that we may not get to if we are only focusing on what the child is not able to do or what the child's deficits are. So, to answer your question, yes, we do talk about the future. Sometimes it can be the future that's here and now. How do I get into a school? Or how do I get my child a play date? Or the children in my society don't play with him or her. How do I change that? It could be something as near term as that. And sometimes it could be about the distant future as well.
This is amazing, really. What you shared in terms of the efforts was really, really very, very nice. And I'm sure everyone is going to remember this. And it's so beautifully coined, really, Roopa. And I think I'm going to the next F word, which I keep talking about, which is finances. So how important do you think doing a proper financial planning exercise for the family who's already dealing with so many things regarding their child is?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. I think that for many parents, it's also one more thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
You rightly called out all the different pulls and pushes in their lives. Both the parents are working. You need to travel in a city like Mumbai. Just everyday survival takes up so much of your mind space that there isn't any time left to sit back and think about the future. And why for children with disabilities and their families, I think this might be a situation for most people, that you're so caught up in your everyday lives that it's hard to step back and take a hard look at how are you doing financially and what could you do to improve your financial health. And that's where, having people like you who through your, various articles and awareness talks have just made some of this so simple for even people like me to understand. And I think it's hugely important and it should be part of the conversation. In fact, we do have a family resource center at Ummeed now. And one of the things that they will take on is also to collaborate with people like you to make this information accessible to many of the families who visit our center. And to start this conversation very early on and not leave it till much later in the day.
Yes, Rupa. In fact, Ummeed has approached and been trying to work and have already conducted a couple of sessions. But yes, it's so crucial and so important with the way inflation is hitting us, and health and cost of various services is definitely set to spiral, and it does impact a special needs parent's pocket really bad. Moving on, I wanted to know your thoughts on if there are three key things that you would like to see changing for people with disability in India, what would that be?
And this could be anything.
Yeah, specific for the child and for the family or for professionals, anything.
Okay. I think the first one I've already spoken about. That I really feel passionately about services being family centered for children and families, or child centered even for children and families, where any service that a family receives takes into account their unique circumstances from which they come, and services and resources are tailor made for that. So, for example, the financial help or inputs that you just spoke about, it perhaps features on no one's agenda right now, not the professionals, and sometimes not even the parents until it's quite late in life for them. But this should be part of the conversations right from the beginning. I dream of a time when there is awareness about what family centeredness truly is. I think a lot of people talk about it right now, but I think more needs to be done to truly understand what it could mean and how we could implement it in our setting. The second thing is something that I've been working on for the last few years, 4 to 5 years, which is a concept called participation. What participation essentially means is, the 6 F words that I spoke about, it embodies the ideas of participation. So things like, stepping out of the house, being able to go to the park, being able to attend a music concert if we wanted to, going to a movie with friends, going to a restaurant with family members, or holding a job, having a job. These are things that we don't even give a second thought to as people who are so-called neurotypical, right? We consider this as our right. We consider this as something that, of course, we will have access to. And yet, this is exactly the sort of thing that children with disabilities have to strive for and struggle for every single day. And that's because we put the entire onus on the child with disability to make this happen. If the child doesn't have friends, the child needs to learn to speak in order to make friends. If the child is not able to go to a park, the child needs to learn to walk to be able to do that. Or if the young person needs to have a job, they need to have all the skills that are needed to fit the jobs that we have decided that we will give to them, right? I want all professionals and families to work towards the world, and this won't happen just because the professionals are pushing for it. I think the push needs to come from everywhere. I hope for a time when all of this is the way we do things. It's not something that we have to put in extra effort for, but that's just how it happens. That Parks are accessible to all. You don't have to know how to walk in order to step into a park. You don't need to necessarily know how to talk just to make friends. That people around you are sensitive enough, that they are warm enough, curious enough to want to be your friend and to connect with you. That a family of a child with a disability doesn't have to worry and feel shy and embarrassed about going to a restaurant and having a meal because they worry about what the other people in the restaurant might say. That they are able to do that, and the restaurant has policies or systems in place that it makes it accessible to everyone, not just neurotypical people. So, in short, a world where a person with disability gets to do what they want to do because the environment supports them to, and not because we put a condition that they need to acquire the skills or become, ready or worthy enough, if you will, to be able to enjoy these simple pleasures in life.
That was fantastic, Roopa, really. Thanks for, putting it out there and stating all of this. I'm really, really thankful to you about how simply you explained this entire role of a developmental pediatrician. And I feel, every single family who has ever been directed to you, been directed to a DP has definitely benefited from consulting them. I really hope that people are able to direct and guide them, that you should definitely meet one when there is this is spotted by everyone, right from a GP to maybe a school teacher to anybody. Having a professional like you will only help make our lives much easier. Will help the parent feel a lot more confident on how to work with their child and really enjoy their lives the way how beautifully you coined those 6 F words. So thanks a ton for this, and looking forward to catching up with you again very soon on another podcast.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure, Chitra. And thank you for this opportunity. And I'm sure, we continue to learn from parents and children around us. And we wouldn't be here if it were not for you and all the other children that we interact with. So thank you for this opportunity once again. And I look forward to connecting with you.
You were listening to the Special Needs Children podcast with Chitra Iyer, the CEO of MFA and a trustee with the Forum for Autism. If you find this podcast relevant and interesting, it'll be great if you leave a review, share, like and subscribe. You can also let us know if there is any specific topic that you would like us to cover. Feel free to email her on chitra.iyer@myfinad.com, or you can call her on 98337 85892.